All right, hello, my name is Darren Thomas and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this particular video, we're going to be looking at the union and also the intersect statement or clause in SQL and how you can use that and the benefits of it. So let's go ahead and see what we can learn. So I'm already inside my front end or my client for my SQL, and we're going to start with unions. And so what a union does is that it allows you to append or to add rows to a table when they have columns in common with each other. Now this is in contrast to a join, in which joins allow you to add columns, not rows, but primarily columns, but also rows from multiple different tables based on the criteria, whether it's inner join, full join, left join, right join, whatever, based on whatever you decide to join them by, like an ID number or something that they have in common between tables. So with joins, you are expanding the number of columns you might have in your output as well as the number of rows, while as with unions, you are going to primarily be expanding the number of rows in your output table. So let me go ahead and pull up the code for you here so you can kind of see what we're talking about. And here it goes right here. So here's our code right here. And so notice how we have our two statements wrapped inside parentheses. That's the criteria for making a union. And also notice we have in line 6 here, our star of the particular, video union. And so in the first union, notice also in the select statement, how it's basically all of the same columns, So I'm pulling from the same columns because these columns are found in both tables. So street address, city, state, and postal code. If I show you the actual data here, you can see street address is right here, city and state, all right here. And then also in the dealership, we have the same information available. So again, we got street address, city and state, and postal code. All these things are right here working together. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to combine these two tables, not by making new rows, but rather by appending, not by making new columns, but by appending additional rows at the bottom of it. So just so you know, I believe the customer table has about 50,000 rows of data, while the dealership table has, you can see here 20. So when I append these, I'm going to have a new table that has about 50,020 rows of data. And so here's how that works out. And so again, just to make sure things are clear, remember that we are trying to create a table in which we combine or add the rows together to have all the data in one table. That's what we're doing with the union. Another thing I need to mention before we run this is that a union statement will remove duplicates. If you want duplicates, you must use the union all statement. So let's go ahead and run this. Go back up here to the top. All right, there we go. So you can see here, I'm not going to scroll through all 50,000 rows, but you can see all of our data is here. So we're combining our addresses from customers, city, state, and postal code from customers, and also taking the same information from dealership. Now, one thing that is difficult to know is like, where did my data come from? So is this data right here, these rows, are they from the customer or from the dealership table? Now, a way to get around that is that you just create a new column with a name. So I'm creating here a column called customer. That's telling me that this data came from the customer table, and I'm naming this column row. I think I said it backwards. So I'm creating a new column called roll, and inside that particular column, I'm putting customer to tell me it's from the customer table. I will create the same information right here called roll, and I'm going to call it dealer to tell me it's from the dealership table. And then I'm going to sort it by the roll, descending. So if I run this now, go back up to the top. All right. Now you can clearly see here, the first 20 are from my dealership table. That should look familiar. We saw this information right here. And then after that, I have customers for the next 50,000 rows. So that's one way that you can deal with that if you want to. So before we move on to intersect, it is very, very important that you understand that union is meant to combine rows from various tables based on columns that they have in common. Now, you want to make sure the columns match up in the select statements. I mean, you can do something different. Many times you'll get an error message if they don't all agree with each other, or it won't, or you'll get some weird output. I don't know all the different things that can happen when you don't have the same columns in each select statement, but you can get some weird stuff sometimes. But for beginners, it's just going forward, you want to make sure that the select statements have the same columns when you are, of course, going to be trying to use the union statement. Now, let's move on to intersect. Intersect is a little bit different in that it has a slightly different approach to how you want to use it. Let me go ahead and show you. So with intersect, what you're doing is you're trying to find rows that are in common between two select statements. So it's kind of similar to a join, but with a join, you get all the rows that it has in common, whether or not. But with intersect, you don't get any duplicate data. You only find out what the two select statements have in common. So let me go ahead and just show you an example here. So here's what we're doing. We're selecting state and postal code from customers. That's what we're doing here. And then we have the intersect statement in line number 2. And then in line number 3, we're selecting state and postal code from dealership. So what's going to happen when we run this, and you can already see the output down below, is that it's pulling only these 3 instances. In other words, Nevada, California, Arizona, and the following zip codes appear when I make like this union. But again, this is only the unique information. It's not showing me how many times this would happen. If you do this with an inner join, you're going to get every single row where you have Nevada, California, and Arizona, and these following zip codes. So what it's telling me that what these 2 tables have in common is Nevada with the following postal code, California with the postal code, and Arizona. Those are what you have in common between those 2 data sets. Now, just to show you kind of how this works, here's the same information, but this time as a join. So if you look closely at the state, you can see I have Arizona for about the first 25, then I have Nevada for about the next 22, and then California finishes off this table. So again, with the join, you can see there's a lot of duplicate data. But when you do intersect, it removes the duplicates and only shows you the unique combination when you combine those 2 particular tables. That's the difference here. And so you can see that, depending on what kind of question you're trying to answer when you're going into the data, you can figure out what it is an appropriate tool to use. If someone says, I want to know the unique state and postal codes that are in both tables, I could do an intersect, or I could just do a join. It all really depends on what kind of knowledge and skill I have with SQL and how much effort and time I want to put into it. So it really just depends on what you want to know. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to summarize what we learned and then close out the video. So in this particular video, we looked at using the union statement and also using the intersect statement. Union is very, very powerful when you want to try to make a table where you append rows to each other. In other words, they have the same columns in common, but you want to try to combine all the rows into one table for whatever purpose you may have. And so you can see that you must make sure that you have these 2 statements set up inside parentheses. I believe you could do more than 2, but it gets kind of complicated. You have your union statement in between the 2 statements, and generally I recommend that you have the same columns in both select statements. It's possible to ignore that. I've seen it, I've done it, but it gets hard to figure out what's going on, and sometimes you'll get error messages. Next one we looked at was intersect. Intersect is used when you are trying to focus on the common rows between select statements. And so again, it only shows you what you have in common. Duplicates are removed. So if you're looking for unique combinations of data for whatever your purposes may be, then it may be wise to use the intersect statement. So that pretty much wraps up this particular video. I want to thank you so much for listening. My name is Darren Thomas. I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. You take care, and I will see you in the next video.